So when we're writing poetry, because it's so dense and the ideas are so compacted, every choice that we make, our craft choices, repetition, even our lining, our stanza breaks, have meaning and they're very, very purposeful. And I'm going to show you some of the choices that I made in my poem so you can see how I was thinking as a writer and why I made the craft choices that I did. So this is called Annoying, and in this poem I write about the things that annoy me. And one of them, I know you know, I can't stand gum. And I think you'll notice that I do something a little bit differently when I get to this stanza about gum. Sticky syrup, seeping from the partially closed lid, like a tarry miry ooze trapping fingers instead of animals. Tactless drivers, taking 2 parking spaces for their prehistoric rusting heats, like a sumo wrestler on an airplane. Shrill whistling, coming from a musician, blissfully unaware of his off-key torture that pierces the eardrums like a drill. And gum? Yes, gum. Did I mention gum? Slimy blobs of slippery blubber, chewed like a cow's cud and looking every bit as disgusting. Popping, sticking, smacking, cracking gum. Like a clam, perhaps these irritations serve to create beautiful pearls of patience, but I doubt it. And so you'll notice my first 3 stanzas are all very similar. I have the topic on the first line, and then the topic of that stanza on the first line, topic of that stanza on the first line. And then I do the same here, except I repeat the topic 3 times. This is the thing that annoys me the most, and so I'm drawing attention to it through that repetition. And then I have an additional 2 lines here with a simile, 2 lines here with a simile, 2 lines here with a simile. And when you make a pattern and then you purposefully break that pattern, you draw your reader's attention to an idea. And so I break that pattern and I still talk about, I use a simile in here to compare things, but I get off the pattern that I had before. You can see here I've got repetition with the suffixes ing, and I'm doing that to draw attention to the sounds that I can't stand: popping, sticking, smacking, cracking. So those are some choices that I made as an author. And if you were going to emulate my poem, you might do some of those similar things. So let me show you some other options you can use to emulate your poem. So we read The Red Wheelbarrow early on when we were reading Love That Dog. This is a poem that Jack read, and you'll notice that the author made some very deliberate craft choices. He's got 4 very short little stanzas with a lot of description. Each one ends with just 1 word here, and it uses a lot of description to help the reader see that object. He also didn't use capital letters, so I didn't use capital letters in my emulation either. So he's talking about something that is dependent upon. So I thought, well, what is something that I depend on? And so I wrote about the laptop. So much depends upon an old dilapidated laptop, glowing in the dark, covered in damaged pixels. So it's something that's kind of let me down. So if you choose to emulate this, think about an object that you depend on, maybe something that seems very ordinary and you didn't really think about it too much, and then you realize, wow, there's a lot that really is dependent upon that thing. And we read Harlem, and Harlem was talking about a dream deferred, a dream that was put off. And Langston Hughes, we said, repeats similes. He's got a simile here, and then another simile, another simile, another one. He's got another one right here. And he makes a pattern, simile, 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 but then he breaks his pattern. When he gets to the most important emotion, anger, what happens to a dream deferred? Well, the most prominent and perhaps explosive emotion is anger. And so he breaks his pattern to put, or does it explode on a line by itself? He's not using similes anymore. All of a sudden he's using a metaphor and he's italicizing it to draw attention to it. So if you chose to emulate something, emulate Harlem, you could use this template right here. Your title would go here, what happens to a, and then take a look at that. Another option would actually be from Love That Dog, and that is the April 26th entry. And I really like the way Jack writes this. He says, sometimes when you're trying not to think about something, it keeps popping back into your head. You can't help it. You think about it and think about it and think about it and think about it until your brain feels like a squashed pea. And what I like about this is the repetition, because he's trying to show that there's something in his brain and it keeps going around and around and around. So he uses repetition to show that. He has you think about it, and then and on a line by itself, and think about it, and on a line by itself, think about it. So you could do the same thing here. And again, you could copy and paste this right into a Google Doc and fill in the blanks. Sometimes when, what happens, it, and continue from there. We also read 2 poems by Nikki Grimes, and she made a very unusual and deliberate craft choice. Usually, our writing is left aligned. In other words, it all lines up on the left side, except she chose to right align her poems. So usually our writing looks like this, but you'll notice hers looks very unusual. And so as a reader, you look at it and think, well, I wonder why she did it that way. But then you notice that at the end of each line, she's bolded the last word. And when you look at it up and down, it looks like a poem within a poem. It's a line within that poem. So we have thunder blossoms gorgeously above our heads. And over here, my soul has grown deep like the rivers. So you could think maybe about emulating a poem like this. Think about maybe a phrase that you would like to use and then end with one of those words on each line, bolding it to draw our attention to it and right aligning it to really emphasize that, hey, you need to look at the ends of these lines. We also read Foul Shot, and we saw a few student examples, and I have a few more on here that you can look at if you would like to. We noticed that there's a lot of repetition here. We had a repetition of short lines, also short lines that were verbs that ended in S. We had some alliteration, repetition of sounds in there. We had a repetition of phrases. We have this kind of unusual indentation, and that's a pattern there too. We also read Abandoned Farmhouse, and this was a poem with a lot of personification in it, and the objects within that farmhouse were talking about the previous occupants. And so you could do something like that too. Think about a place. What would the objects in that place say about the people who inhabited it? So if you're looking to use one of those two, down at the bottom I have some templates. If you click on those buttons, you could pull up a template like I showed you for April 26th or for Harlem. You're kind of filling in the blanks. And again, you could use that as a Google Doc. So those are some options too. And I have some more student emulations right here. What you're going to do when you're finished with this video is you're going to now go to our poetry website, and there's a link right there in the post. Your cursor will hover up above Emulation, and you'll see a drop-down menu with all of these poems on it. I'd like you to read an additional 3 poems, and then choose one out of all of them that you've read, the ones that we did together and the ones that you read on your own, that you would like to emulate. Be ready to tell me which poem you would like to emulate, and then also what you liked about it. What did you notice in that poem? And a lot of people have liked What If. This is a poem by Shel Silverstein. This is a fun one to emulate because it has some of that anaphora in it. The repetition at the beginning of a line, it has what if over and over and over again. And then it also has some fun repetition of sound in the rhyming. We have a lot of rhyming in here, and this is kind of a silly, fun poem. So think about what you would like to emulate, tell me which poem you would like to emulate, and then also what you noticed about it.